The decorations have been put up. The lights are all off. Even if they're not all down, we still have some lights up because I just don't particularly want to get up on a ladder in sub-zero weather with the wind blowing. But we've hit the point where the lights have been turned off. The gifts have been put away. Everyone's been thanked for the very generous gifts offered. And now, distinctly on the other side of even the last remnants of the Christmas season, winter stretches out before us. In the Midwest, we're getting hit this week with a polar vortex, which is a very complicated way of saying it's going to be cold. And yeah. Now, I know why Christmas lands when it does on December 25th. We can know when John the Baptist was conceived, and we can look at when Mary goes and sees Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mother, and then we have enough data points to figure out when Jesus was born. There's one crucial assumption. The assumption is that John the Baptist and Jesus' the pregnancies were 9 months for Mary and for Elizabeth. So as long as it was a 9-month pregnancy, and it's maybe, but that we know that's how it lands on December 25th. If you ever want to see the math, we can go through it. So I know why December 25th is Christmas. However, if I had my druthers and I could pick, I think I'd rather put Christmas into January. Just give me a little bit more time to prepare, and give me something to look forward to instead of just kind of January gets long. But that sense of time just stretching out in front of you, settling in after excitement, I think that's where we find Mary and Joseph in this moment as well. After Jesus is born and there's angels and there's shepherds, then they settle down and they got to raise a kid, newborn, first kid, right? And they're living in a new community in Bethlehem where they'd gone for the purposes of the census. And they spend time taking care of, Joseph sets up his carpentry shop and he's doing that. And Mary's taking care of Jesus as Jesus does the thing that all 3-month, 6-month, 1-year-olds do. And then on January 6th, right after Jesus had turned 2, right? On January 6th, the Magi show up. And that is, it shows up on a Sunday. Like you can if you enter a year and a date, it will tell you what day. You can find ways to figure out what day of the week it was. So it was actually the start of the week for them because Saturday is Shabbat in the Jewish tradition. So they show up on a Sunday, start of the week. There's some Magi show up, and all of a sudden they have excitement again. They have excitement. They have the foreigners showing up, the people who understand that Jesus is someone special. They're talking about something that they probably had been done talking about for a while. Like after Jesus is born, Mary and Joseph probably have some pretty deep conversations about who he is and what's this going to look like. But after 2 years, they'd had plenty of time to understand the implications as best they could. And they just had gotten back to laundry and housework and feeding the family and just doing their thing, right? But now these foreigners have shown up and have brought gifts that are beyond anything that they have ever seen. We live in a time today where there's not much that we haven't seen. I've never been near an Alfa Romeo sports car or Maserati, or I'll pick some exotic handbag or dress or jewel, the Hope Diamond, something like that. We can see those pretty easily. Can't touch them, but we can see them. They don't have that back then. For them, for these Magi to show up with gold and frankincense and myrrh, this is a big deal. They have just heard these words. They've never seen this stuff before, much less touched it, or even dared to dream that they could even own it. And so Mary and Joseph, they're at this, there's this 24-hour period, I'm guessing, where they have this they're pondering this, is this an inflection point? Is this a turning point where from here on out, the Magi have shown up and now Jesus has been recognized for who he is, that this is someone really important. This is not a newborn king, this is a toddler king. This is going to be a really big deal, and from here on out, is this going to be our lives? Are our lives going to be transformed by gold, frankincense, and myrrh such that that might be how we live from now on? Well, they were right. It was an inflection point. And what we read is that instead of moving to the capital like they might have dreamed of or pondered, a different dream happens. And Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, warns Joseph, you got to skedaddle now because Herod is coming for you. You got to run. Get to Egypt. Move fast. And so that's what happens. After the Magi leave, Joseph has this dream, and they're pondering about what might be next. Or I'll just change because they have to get out, and so they go west. They go to Egypt. Now, this does make a lot of sense. There's a practical and there's a scriptural reason. The practical reason is that if you go back 500 or so years before this, Babylon had invaded Judah and had invaded out of the northeast. They'd come out of the northeast and come down to Judah, and then and they'd taken sort of the trained people, the educated people, the leaders, the Jewish people off into exile for 70 years. And this is where we get the book of Daniel, because Daniel was one of the people taken into exile. Daniel and his three friends, whose names I have a hard time pronouncing. And so the Jews sort of saw this coming. They ran to get away from the invading Babylonians, and they ran the other direction. So if Babylon's invading from up in the northeast, they run west, sort of southwest. They get out of there, and they go to Egypt. And so there were groups of Jews in Egypt, Jewish communities, who had been there for centuries at this point. And so Mary and Joseph, when they run west. And there were Jewish communities who were ready and willing to take in a young family of Jews who found the need to get away from Israel because they were scared of Herod. Herod's a scary dude. It would have been well known Herod's a scary dude. All they would have said is, we're scared of Herod. And they would have, yeah, you have every right to be scared of Herod. Here, let me set you up. Carpenter? Yeah, we'll get you going. That's how that would have worked. Also, there's this entire sense of it's in Hosea 11. Out of Egypt I have called my son. Hosea, this 8th century prophet, this sort of out of Egypt I have called my son Israel. And does this refer to Israel called out of Egypt to go through the River Jordan to enter the promised land and to live according to God's will? Yes. And Jesus will come out of Egypt to go and be baptized in the River Jordan and to live according to God's will. That too, right? So the term is recapitulation, the idea that Jesus is going through the footsteps of the Jewish people, and he doesn't just blaze a trail forward for the people of faith to follow him. He walks through the footsteps of what has gone before. So it's a complete recapitulation, and he's heading off and taking the Jewish people in a new direction going forward. So that's what's happening here with being called out of Egypt. Now, what happens while they're in Egypt? I don't know. There are traditions around what happens in Egypt. There's traditions of where they stop and where they go, and there are churches built along the way, but I don't know the traditions very well. I could say that traditions usually have some rootedness in truth. So something happened. We don't know the details. But this is what happens. They go to Egypt, and then they come back when they hear that Herod has died, and they see one of his sons is in charge of that area, and Herod's son is scary. All the Herods are scary. Herods are scary people. And so they don't go all the way back to Bethlehem. They get a little bit further out. They want to keep some distance, so they go to Nazareth. It's safer there, and they can keep a low profile. And that's what they do for 10 years, 20 years. Then a couple of years past that, they do this until Jesus is 30. And again, I ponder what this would have been like. Mary and Joseph went 2 years between all the excitement of Jesus' birth and then the Magi showing up and having this moment of excitement again. And then they go to Egypt for a few years. And then they come back and settle in at Nazareth. And again, it's back to the long-term, doing the thing, finishing raising Jesus to be an adult. And I'm sure that Mary was confused at times. God had told her that this son, Messiah, right, anointed, appointed by God to change the Jewish people. And then he does what his sort of adopted father Joseph does. He takes up carpentry. And he continues that carpentry gig after Joseph dies. And Mary keeps on doing the same thing she's been doing all along, taking care of her family. This leaves me pondering. It's part of pondering the nature of what it means to be in the middle of winter. Because in the middle of winter, it gets dark early. And just things look different in the dark. What gets washed away and easy to miss in the brightness of the day sometimes is far easier to see at night. I think looking at the trip of the Magi and then Mary and Joseph, this is very clear with the Magi. Like, the Magi were following a star, and that star could not be seen in the light of day. They traveled by night. They traveled it by night so that they could see the thing that was important, but they could not see except when it was in the darkness. This other example is Joseph is being warned in a dream about Herod, a warning that comes at night because he's dreaming, right? And if you look at the art of Mary and Joseph leaving and running for Egypt, it usually captures this sense of being at night. Like, they get up and they're on the road at night. And it's a fascinating thing to ponder, at least to me. It's fascinating to ponder. Like, Joseph, in the middle of the night, knows that he has to run. He has to get his family and he has to get going. And like, in the middle of the day, if you're planning a trip, Joseph is a carpenter. He lives by his tools. And so in the middle of the day, I could see Joseph sort of like making a list, like, what tools do I bring? What can I carry with me? I'm going to make a living wherever I land, like just sort of organizing it and like packing a back and sort of working out. And like, that's not how the paintings of fleeing Herod and running off to Egypt is, because at night, things look a bit different. Like, what matters most? I've got Mary, I've got Jesus, I've got some road food, let's go. And that's kind of what happens. There's a clarity to what you see at night. There's a saint of the church, a servant of the church from the 16th century in Spain, a guy named St. John of the Cross, who writes about this, how the night can be our friend. He talks about how the night can help us see more clearly. And in the night, like, and he's talking about the night, and when I'm talking about the night from here on out, I'm not just referring to certain hours of the day when the sun is down. Like, there are darknesses that have nothing to do with the sun and the moon, right? But being able to see clearly, the star to follow, what is the reason for the journey that they're taking, that can be easiest in the darkness when there's just not as many distractions. The wise men kept turning to that star month after month, year after year, until they found their answer to who this newborn king was. Mary and Joseph understood their task very clearly in the darkness of the night. All other distractions stripped away. They knew their task: protect this child. And that's what they did. They protected that child that night, month after month, taking a journey to Egypt, coming back. They were very clear what they had to do until Jesus stepped forward to begin his ministry. And we remember both of them. We remember the Magi and Mary and Joseph for their long faithfulness that begins in the night, their commitment to something that they did not fully understand, their commitment to something that made sense when all the distractions were stripped away, and we honor them for it. They both had moments of real excitement in the midst of this. Like, I'm sure for the Magi when they met Herod, I'm sure that was very exciting. For Mary and Joseph, they had some moments of excitement as well. But that's not what most of their lives looked like. Most of their lives looked like that long faithfulness in the dark, holding on to what matters most, following that star, keeping that child safe. that long faithfulness that they showed us, their commitment to something over time, I think it matters for us to hold on to this. I think it's way too easy to skip past it, to go, let's go to the baptism of Jesus and let's go get to the Sermon on the Mount. We can get busy and full of the things that are going to come, and we will get to those things. But I think it's worth it here at the beginning of the year, after the glitter of Christmas has faded away, to ask, in the dark, what is it that you look to? What is it that I look to? What is the star that we follow? What is the task that matters most, that we keep doing, like the Magi and like Mary and Joseph? The task that we keep on doing month after month. What is the beauty that we are cultivating? What is the art we craft? What is the person that we serve? What is the task in the community that we're part of that we keep on doing? What is the prayer that we continue to lift up? What's the detail in the church community that we have committed to taking care of? It can be something others see, and it can be something others don't. But I can tell you that God sees, and that what we are each doing in this manner matters. We trust that, just as with the Magi and with Mary and Joseph, and with so many others in Scripture, that God is weaving together and guiding the work of the saints towards God's plan, as each saint is focused on that one thing that they're doing. What is the star? What's the task that they have, that they focus on, that they can see clearly when all the other distractions are stripped away? John Wesley captures this sense of commitment, of having a long faithfulness. In his words, he wrote something called the covenant prayer that is oft used at the beginning of the year in Methodist churches. And I invite you to close your eyes and join with me in hearing these words, and I invite them to be your prayer for this season. He writes, "I am no longer my own, but thine, Lord. Put me to what thou wilt, rank me with whom thou wilt. Put me to doing, put me to suffering. Let me be employed by thee or laid aside for thee, exalted for thee or brought low for thee. Let me be full, let me be empty. Let me have all things, let me have nothing. I freely and heartily yield all things to thy pleasure and disposal. And now, O glorious and blessed God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, thou art mine and I am thine, so be it. And the covenant which I have made on earth, let it be ratified in heaven. Amen.